with some resin, and we're going to see if this can smooth out FDM printing. So in other words, 3D printing with PLA. Maybe you have some other PLA, but we're going to see if it can smooth this stuff out. This is kind of interesting because we also have a couple of options. We've got just straight resin, which is the viscosity of this is real liquidy, and it's going to pour all over the place. Trying to get it to stay in place and then cure it could be a problem. So some people have recommended baby powder or talcum powder and add that to the resin, and that way it gets a little bit more muddy. It's a little bit more kind of like this, what we get right here, kind of more syrupy type of thing. And basically what I ended up doing is putting in, I don't know, it was about that much resin, and then added in like a long shoot of the baby powder there. And this makes it turn out definitely a little bit thicker. And so you can see how it runs down the glass. It's not as liquidy as regular resin. So this could give us the kind of the, I don't know what you'd call it. It ends up, it could be the stuff that we need. Now there is also this stuff here, which is green stuff resin. Hey, George, we're checking out some resin stuff and just doing some minor tests to see how we can smooth out resin. We're going to be looking at doing the resin to cure prints, or not to cure them, but basically to just try to smooth out areas. And so I wanted to kind of do a little bit of a test on here. Green Stuff World offers this right here, which is a UV transparent resin. And what you can end up doing, we've got a little UV light, and we could shine that on there. And I've used this for resin models in case I broke something off, or, you know, usually that's the case. Fumbling stuff around, dropping stuff, breaking stuff, I can quickly put this on and then cure it with a UV light. So we're kind of going to go into that. The problem is that this is kind of liquidy, but not as much as liquid resin. So again, it also kind of depends on the viscosity of the resin that you're using. So we're going to try this out. And there is a place on our print there that you can see where that line is, and that whole front area there needs to be kind of smoothed out. And so that's going to be one area that we're going to check out. And the other one is this seam line right here. So that's a little noticeable. You can feel it. And we're going to throw some resin on there, and we'll see. Probably for this bigger area, we'll use the resin that we mix with talcum powder. For this little mold line here, if you can end up seeing that mold line right there where the two pieces come together, what we'll end up doing is we'll take a little bit of that, this UV resin from Green Stuff World. Matter of fact, let's just go ahead and we'll see if we can get you all in here. I wasn't really prepared for this type of video, so you'll have to excuse me and the mess and all of this stuff. Let me see if we get a... So this is the seam line right here, and I really need to just clean up. I've got all these pieces for the rest of my ripper mass that I need to put together. So here is our seam line, and with that right across there, and so what we're going to end up doing, it's not too noticeable. So we're going to use the Green Stuff World little resin, and this stuff is, it's a liquid, but you can see how it kind of drops in there. And just put it across, and we've got a noticeable bead there. The other thing that we could end up doing is also getting a little bit of a rag, and we'll get a little bit, I'll just kind of get a little bit of that excess there to fill that, so we've got a little bit of a bump. And then we'll use our UV pen And we can put that UV light on there, and that will cure that resin. And then what we could end up doing is coming back, and then we could sand that out and hopefully get a smooth surface. But we also have all of these layer lines on here, and even though this is printed at a 0.16 millimeters, if we really wanted to make this shine, we would have to go through a series of sandings, but this might be something where we could do a larger surface in getting this stuff cured, and then just do a quick little sanding on there and to get it so it's really, really smooth. Because right now you're going to be able to see the layer lines. With that, with a 2-in-1 spray paint filler, this would be covered up fairly easy. And there would be minimal sanding that you would have to do. Maybe a couple coats and then maybe some sanding, and you would be good to go. So there we have it. And it has a shiny, as you can see that, it's got the shiny end on, or finish on there. And there we go. We'll just make sure this is really cured up. So I'm probably going to do this more because I've seen some good results on some other videos. And so with that, I'm probably going to get a better UV light. So just be careful when you're using the UV light and not to shine it up into your eyes, because that can be problematic. Might even want to use some eye protection, but it's kind of like a gun. Point it in the direction of the thing you want to destroy and not at yourself, and you should be good to go. So, and there we have it. And you can actually feel a little bit of the heat on there. And with that, what we could end up doing is going through with some different levels of sandpaper. Like I've got 120 grit, but let's see, 120. So this is 120 grit. So what we can end up doing is I'll just go through and we will do a little bit of sanding on this. You can see we've still got a raised edge on there. So kind of dug in there a little bit, and that has smoothed it out. But the good thing is we can also see, let's see if we can get you up close and personal here. So we can see that it smoothed it out, but also with that sanding of the 120, we can see on this side and this side that we've got a little bit of a difference in the layer lines. So if you can see that there. So it's kind of smoothed out the area there. So even, let's see if we can get a larger surface area. And I can feel that. So you can do something like that. And there's a noticeable difference, and that is pretty smooth. The only thing that's different about this is using a clear resin is that you really won't see the difference in that. But we can see already a difference on the 0.16 layers on both sides of this compared to this here. We got a comment and it says, I keep debating on whether to go that route. I missed the comment. Sorry about that. But here, what we can end up seeing, and if we even shine the light on there, we can see We've got a little less layer lines by just doing a little bit of sanding on this compared, like this is smooth, this is smooth, this is smooth. But then when we get into the areas here, you can kind of see the layer lines on that. So I don't know how evident that is on the video, but that definitely, that is smooth right there. So that seems to be a good job on that. So the good thing is that you can use like an orbital sander, or perhaps a sander with the you know, the triangle pads and stuff like that. You could end up doing some sanding. And I take a look at that in the light. That smoothed out pretty darn good. You can't even feel that anymore. So that clear liquid resin that you get from Game Stuff World, which is a transparent resin, works. But this is a little expensive, and this is like only 1 fluid ounce. Also, there's kind of some limitations because the UV pen that I have is minimal, and I would definitely have to get a big UV light to do larger considerable areas because this is battery powered. So with that, we're going to move on to this big area here that you can see all there, and you can see that little line, and that's almost kind of like a void. So, and I'm not sure why that's there. It's almost like it, whoever modeled it, it ended up, it's that empty void there. So that's the area that we're going to try to take our resin here, and we'll see how that goes. So I guess what we could end up doing, no, I'm not going to suck it. Don't suck up the resin. But we will get the resin. We'll just kind of apply that. You can also end up doing the foam brush, and to see how that works out, to get in there and to really try to level that out. The cool thing about resin is that if it's real liquidy, you're not going to be able to, it's going to pour all over the place. You're not going to have like that, you know, water. It's going to be too watery. So what we'll end up doing here, we'll kind of extend this out, but we still want it to fill all the holes. Try to do that. So again, this is just kind of a testing phase, and we'll see how this goes. And the more liquidy it is, the ability to level out, but then there's a level of where it's just too much liquid, and so that's why you need a little bit of talcum powder on there. So, and I guess what we could end up doing, I'll take an area over here as well, because we've got some pretty decent layer lines that we can still see, and we'll just add some of this in there. Dripping resin on my model. And then what we'll do is we'll just take our brush, our foam brush, and we will bring it across here and see how that works out. And we will continue on with that. A nice even drag across those surfaces, and I think we will be good to go. So now what we'll end up doing is we'll go back to the close-up view, and we will try doing try doing this here. So we have this part up here. As you can see, we can barely see that line. So if we put that light on there, we can see the resin, and that line has disappeared and that void is filled pretty well. So we'll just go ahead and hit that. And then we can go down here and you can see this area that is being cured as well. So you can see the streaks that we end up having there. We go against the grain, and that should do pretty well. Let's go ahead and we will kind of drag this out a little bit. Maybe we'll get a little bit more. We'll just kind of continue on. The sponge does leave a little bit of, that's a lot smoother. But you can definitely see where the resin is and where it's not. So the cool thing about this is, even though with a white resin on a white, it makes it a little bit harder. But as soon as you put the UV light on there, what we end up seeing is the definite starting and stop point of that resin. So there's a clear line right there of where we put that on there. And we can see that's already, it is already cleaning those lines up pretty good. And if we go back over here, oh yeah, it filled that void great. So yeah, pretty happy about that. And again, you'd have to do like a couple of minutes. Again, this pen UV light is limited in what we can end up doing because of battery life, but this is just kind of a test piece to see how this will fare. And so if it works well, again, this is just going to be a simple cosplay print. It's going to have some damage on it, so I'm not too concerned. And we're also going to spray it with some 2-in-1 filler, so that way I'm not too concerned with this if one part is smoother than other parts. So I'm not too concerned with that, but I do want to see how this works out and what it'll look like. So with this, we could really cover a large surface area and be able to cure it and smooth it out fairly quickly. I'm just kind of limited because of the limited wattage with the batteries. I think this has got like AA battery or AAA battery, I think it is. A couple of AAAs. And we will see how that goes. Okay, it's still a little tacky. So, and again, I think this is where it comes into play. If Prime Day is still going on, I will definitely have to get some more, or get a better light, a UV light, kind of a real big UV light to be able to cure this. So, because this is definitely still a little tacky. And I do have a battery powered, or not a battery, but a wall powered UV light with my wash and cure station for my Saturn III Ultra. So what we might do is go over there and give that a try. Because if this ends up being, let's see, yeah, it's still a little. And it also makes me wonder about the ratio for the curing on this. You know, the ratio between the resin and the baby powder or talcum powder. Because that, if you add that in, that should affect the curing time. So usually with this small amount of resin, this wouldn't be a big deal. But because we added that baby powder in there, perhaps that is causing this to, we're gonna have to cure this a lot longer than what you would with just regular resin. So, But after we cure this out, and that's looking pretty darn smooth, we can see up here that we got a few layer lines from the model, but with that, it smoothed that out really, really nice. So that definitely looks like it'll be something worth doing, especially with a much larger UV light and a wall-powered UV light, because this would just take too long. Just try to get that in frame there. But yeah, big difference as far as like layer lines. You can see that fills that in, and then that would make your post-processing a lot easier by doing some UV resin curing, and then put on your paint primer, and then you could go and do a little bit of sanding instead of a lot of sanding. So yeah, let's see how that ended up. That's still a little wet and tacky. So, and so's that there. Some of that is dry, but we can kind of get a look at that. So, and if we take a look at the resin, let's take a look at this. And I think what we'll end up doing is we'll go over to the UV wall-mounted pen that we have. And if we look at the viscosity of this, we can see that it's really, 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 see how watery that is? And we add more resin like that, then, especially if you're trying to do vertical prints and things like that, or vertical lines, or you don't want it to seep into everything, that would come into play too. So let's see, let's add on a little bit more, and then we'll take it over to the UV pen that I have that is wall powered. And we'll just put a little bit more on there. Ooh, that's already a lot smoother. I can feel that. So it's cured to some degree. And then we'll just take our brush. That smoothed it out pretty good. I'll just run this across here. Just lightly take it over. I guess the quality of the brush too comes into play. And then our layer lines are going this way. So as we're doing this, the layer lines are going this way. So we want to go against the layer lines to kind of let that resin get into those spots. We'll just go ahead and drag that out, and we should be good to go. So let's take it over to the UV pen, the wall-mounted UV pen. And I gotta see how we're gonna do this. So much. I didn't think of the logistics of all this. So let's see, we'll close this. That way we can get rid of some of this background light. If you're sensitive to light flashing and going into seizures, I apologize. So what we'll end up doing, this is part of the Elegoo wash and cure station. So we've got the wash and cure station. It also comes with a UV pen. So with that, I'm pretty sure, yeah, we've got the UV light. We can do that. And this is a constant source of light. So this will be a lot better. Oh yeah, that's a lot better. And we'll get you in here. Take a look at this. So you definitely get a lot more light. But the UV that I want to get is like it's a big, it's about like that big, it's a huge UV light. So, but as we're curing this, we can end up seeing how it filled the layer lines, and it is looking really good. There's a marked difference between the layer lines of where we don't have the resin versus where we have the resin. And again, I'm just kind of limited by the output of this UV light. But with like a 20, I think I've seen them on Amazon for like 21 or 28 watts or something like that. Some really big UV lights, and that would cure this stuff really, really quick. So we'll just kind of continue doing this. And you can actually see some of it is still wet, and then when it cures, it kind of, that wet sheen goes away. So we'll have to do a series of passes on this. So this isn't, I wouldn't recommend this for doing large prints or large parts, or even medium-sized parts. I would probably only use this pen for like super small stuff and details. But for larger stuff, you would definitely need a larger UV light source. But with that being said, this is just a test to see how well this would work, and kind of a proof of concept type of thing. Oh, that smoothed out really, really nice up on this end here. I'm trying to get this so you all can see if we can get this closer. I'm just so unorganized today. See if we can get this really focused in. So if you can see that, yeah, that's that line that we had that was right there. You can't even see that. And the rest of the layer lines on there where that was printed is non-existent. And if we go down here, like where's the camera at? Yeah, there it is. So we can kind of see the layer lines here on the parts where we didn't have resin. But then when we get down to this area here, there's like next to nothing. Just trying to get a good, there we go. It's a little bit better. We can still see it's wet, a little damp, but there we go. But it really does smooth that out. So it definitely looks pretty good. And especially if you can see that there. That is really smooth as well. So definitely, that definitely works. And if we can see it down here compared to this, you can actually, I don't know if you all can see it, but the layer lines, it's more evident in real life than it is on the video, I think. And then trying to get this lined up to where you can see it. But it is curing up and smoothing out those layer lines really nicely. If I do this, there we go. So you can see that there. Turns out pretty good for the most part. Real good. That's really smooth. So, do we see any, get a little bit of some wet areas on there, or damp areas. got kind of a wet sheen on it. But again, with a better UV light source, stronger one, that would definitely cure that up quick, fast, and in a hurry. But these, that is just a really good result. I'm digging that right now. So, sorry for the moving around and so much stuff like that, but it does seem to be working fairly well. And still a little bit damp, but if we can try to get this to where we can show the layers, so you can see up there, hopefully you can see the layer lines on there, but as we go down to where it's been applied, that has filled that in pretty well. So we got that, and then especially down here on that part, we can see still a little bit shiny, but it's filled in those layer lines. There you go. Filled in those layer lines really, really well. And you can kind of see that, there you go. You can see that shine on there. So that does seem like, and then if we get up towards the top here, that's where we start getting into, and you can noticeably see those layer lines on the untreated surface there. So that to that, but you can see that turns out pretty good. So minimal sanding that we would have to do on this. So that seems to work out pretty good. So I am pretty excited about this. And it's still just a little bit damp, so it definitely needs some more curing, but the way that it filled in the void and the areas like that, it definitely seems pretty good, and definitely a viable way in which you can end up curing your print. So yeah, good stuff. So I think that's good enough for me to show that this is a viable option. And yeah, I'll have to work on, try to do some research and see what is the most desired ratio between resin and baby powder or talcum powder, whatever you want to end up calling it, and seeing what other people have come up with. But I think once this is end up curing, and then just do some really, really light sanding with possibly, I don't know, with like a 400 or a 600 grit, I think you could end up getting a real nice finish off of this. So yeah, definitely fill in the void on here. So remember how we had that hollowed, that line that was in the center there? You can't even see that now. And then you can see where it's filled in, because that basically from here up, what ended up happening is that you had kind of like, it's almost like it was a layer low. So there's something with the model, but it was the resin has been able to fill that in, and that worked out pretty good. So, but for the most part, I think a lot of the processing that you're going to do, unless you want to do something like a Mandalorian helmet or some surface where it has to have like a mirror, perfectly smooth surface, you're going to have to go through a series of filling, sanding, filling, sanding, filling, sanding, doing some wet sanding towards the end, you know, like 4 or 5 different times from what I've seen on different videos, and to be able to get that level of clarity. Also, the other people that have used automotive filler products seem to get a better result than spray can fillers and things like that. Just because there's more, it's the grit, I guess, in the filler is not as fine as automotive with fillers and primers and things like that. So take that into consideration as well. But yeah, I got some bubbles in here and stuff like that. So again, I'll have to look at other people's ratios for resin printing, but it turned out pretty good. And then our other thing we ended up doing is this decal that was here, or this detail. This was originally on this side, and I made a video of where I took this piece here, put it into the slicer, and what we ended up doing is basically cutting this out and slicing it, or with the cutting tool, because this piece was too big for Tinkercad, then put the smaller piece into Tinkercad, then we're able to take the piece out and export it and be able to put that exact same piece, and while it's perfectly molded onto the side there, it fit like a glove. So again, if you looked at that, you wouldn't think that that was an additional piece, which I did make another piece, and you know, if I wanted to put two on here, you know, I could do something like that. So again, you could do some kit bashing on some of your cosplay prints to be able to get some different details. And with that, you know, if you wanted to have some screw holes or any number of things, some knobs, you could put additional, I guess, details on your cosplay items by doing that. And so using a combination of the slicer and cutting up the model and then importing it into Tinkercad, be able to tweak and play with it, or just go to Tinkercad, make some additional knobs and things like that, export them as an STL, print them out, and then put them onto your cosplay. That would work out pretty well. Yeah, so anyway, that's what we got going on. So we're gonna continue to do the boring stuff of curing that because it's still a little tacky. And you can see it's hardening up a bit, but yeah, that's what we end up doing. So yeah. And eventually we're going to get some more primer. We will shoot this whole thing with primer. I'm not too concerned about it because it's going to be like a Borderlands rifle. I think it's Borderlands 1 or 2 or something like that. I'm not sure. But it should be a quick paint job, and it's not going to be highly detailed, just kind of that cartoonish type of paint job like we did on the Ripper mask. So with that, speaking of the Ripper mask, I want y'all to take a look at this. So as we go into the inner sanctum, got the cool lights and everything. And so we've got this Ripper here that I ended up making. So that one turned out really good. And you can see the details. I mean, this turned out fantastic. George says, I was wondering if I can use resin as an adhesion for magnets. I haven't heard of that. I would probably stick with super glue. Resin isn't as strong as super glue, so I would stick with CA glue and maybe some activators. So super glue would definitely be better on that. But let's take a look at the wife's helmet that she's painting. So we did my mask here, and so with all the cool details and everything, and then she wanted to paint hers, and so this is what she's done so far. Now this is her first time doing any painting and stuff like that. I mean, she's a long time ago, but I mean, this is pretty good for what she's done. So the other thing we're going to go through is, like with this one here, we've got kind of shading on some of the areas to kind of give it more depth, and so we're going to be doing that, kind of show her how to do that on the edges. See how, like here, it's just pretty tan. And then if we go over to mine, you can see there's a definite shadow or a darkened area on that same ridge or that overhang. And so it kind of gives that shadow effect. And of course, with the bolts that we have there, and use the washes to kind of bring out or highlight and frame out certain areas of the print that we haven't done with this. So if you're kind of wondering how you would shade this, basically all you'd have to do is just kind of put this under a light and you can see where the shading is, kind of like we see on that nuts and bolts type thing there. And then that little bit of overhang, that would kind of be your guide. And the overhang down there, how it's darker because of the shadow from the light, that's where you do your wash or your paint and stuff like that, and a kind of the underside. Because if you notice when we do this, that's all tan. But as soon as we turn it up there, we get the shadow on that overhang, and that's basically what we're going to do and mimic with the shading of washes and paint. So she's going to be basically the yellow ripper, and I'm going to be the blue ripper. And then I ended up making her pistol. So that's all finished up. I put a high gloss on it as well. And so this will be her pistol that turned out pretty good. So we've got that there. And then I'll end up having the rifle with the cobalt blue. So we'll kind of match the equipment and the mask, and it should turn out pretty good. So yeah, it's coming along nicely. Nicely indeed. So that's what we got going on. So there it is. So we did a couple of things. What we ended up doing is taking a look at, let's get a little bit more light. We looked at some resin and what we could end up doing with the resin. You can use it in its natural state with no additives. The problem is the viscosity is going to be real water-like, and so if you need it to, stay put, you're going to have to put some type of additive like baby powder or talcum powder under there to kind of solidify it a little bit. But it does seem to work out rather well. We also found out that we do need to have a stronger UV light source, so we got to do that, pick up one of those. But I think this will really minimize the amount of processing that we have to do with a print. I've seen a lot of people in a lot of videos where they have their prints and doing their thing. They use a filler, they sand it, they use a filler, they sand it, they use a filler and sand it. And it's a series of filling and sanding. And I think depending on the viscosity of the resin and the talcum powder, you can kind of build that up. With that being said, other people have used Bondo, which is an automotive filler, which is really kind of almost like a clay putty type. And so it's really, really thick, almost too thick in some circumstances. And so you can add some acetone to that to kind of thin it out a bit and get the viscosity of like what we saw with the resin and the talcum powder, depending on how much you put in there. So depending on your needs, you can make it as viscous or as putty-like as you want. So yeah, a little bit of a learning curve to do there, but that should be pretty interesting. So anyway, with that being said, yeah, just thought I'd make a quick little video. I know it's not as professional as some of the other stuff, but yeah, sorry about that. I apologize. I deeply apologize. If you could like the video and subscribe to the channel, I would really appreciate that. That would really help out the channel. And with that, stay subscribed so you can keep track of what we're doing and seeing how the rest of the Ripper cosplay stuff comes into play. And also, if you know of some models that has like armor of shoulders or forearms and knee pads or something like that, if you know some for free, put them in the comment section down below. George says it was pretty interesting, and yeah, interesting enough for me to do a video and to see kind of the results, a proof of concept type of thing. So kind of excited about the results. I just need a better UV source, stronger UV source. So we'll be hitting up Amazon and checking that out. Okay, so that is going to be it for today's video. I'm going to go out and have kind of a brunch. It's about 10 after 11 here in Korea. And we're going to go to a coffee shop. We're going to get a little bit of a snacky brunch going on thing. And then, of course, got to have our lattes. So we'll do that. And we will see you all in the next video. So thanks for watching, George, everybody else who checks us out. I appreciate it. And we'll see you on the next one. Peace. Alrighty, good. And yes, we're